everyone, Amber Kane, textile designer and creativity educator. And now that I'm back from the American Craft Council show, I wanted to kind of share some insights and thoughts that I had as I was really paying attention to, while I've done a lot of shows before and I've done shows on a similar scale to the American Craft Council show. This was the first time actually doing this show. So I was kind of taking some notes as to information that the thought was running through my head. I wish someone would have told me about this, and so I'm going to be that someone for you. So one thing is, before the show, before you get there, they send out an email telling you that you can buy Wi-Fi for the weekend, and I think it was something about $125 for just a few days, which seemed kind of crazy to me. So I had some friends that had done the show before and touched base with them just to see if it was, does no like 3G or 4G work in the convention center? Was it really something necessary to consider? And everyone said, no, it's fine. Your cell phone, your data plan should work perfectly fine. If you are someone who doesn't have a data plan, I still would strongly recommend skipping their Wi-Fi because it's so expensive. So 2 things to look into. One, just purchase your own hotspot. I think you can get them for like $7 or something. It's not a lot of money. So buy your own hotspot, do a little Googling. Or 2, I actually have a cell phone plan through Republic Wireless, which I pay $10 a month, which means that most of the time my data is running off of Wi-Fi, but you're allowed to switch your plan twice a month. And so when I do a show, I crank my plan up and for a couple days just pay an increased rate, which I think I paid it would increase it to $29 a month. Which is still cheaper than the $125 for a couple days. So there are sometimes those type of things that shows send out that make you kind of like nervous, think you have to buy them. If at all possible, reach out to someone you know who's already done the show to actually touch base on how necessary that is. Number 2, so they give you very little information about loading in. You'll have some basic information as to where the load-in dock is, but most of the time you'll be a little unsure if you're actually where you're supposed to be. Because no one really tells you what's going on. So 1, you need to be prepared and willing just to ask a lot of questions, because if you don't ask questions, no one's going to tell you anything. Specifically for the American Craft Council show, you pull onto an off street that's an unmarked street just to make life interesting, and you sit in a line of cars and you're waiting until one of the union workers comes and tells you that you can move in, and then you drive into the loading dock and you pull into different loading areas so that you're actually fairly close to where your booth is. So that part is nice. Once you actually get in, you can park your car. You have 45 minutes to unload your car, and normally you're relatively close to your booth. So that part is super nice. It's just the waiting part where you're probably going to be a little bit unsure if you're where you're actually supposed to be. Setup, which I will show you some images of, and I go over a lot more in my craft show planning guide. Can be super stressful. When I started shows, it was not smooth sailing. My husband and I would always get in some kind of argument because I was stressed out. I didn't have a solid plan. He wasn't clear on the plan. I wasn't in the mood to communicate, and it just always kind of turned into a disaster. I will say at this point it goes so much more smoothly. I have a really streamlined setup, a very simple booth display, and I can set up my booth in like under 2 hours if I really have to. I try and give myself a little bit more time than that if it's not necessary to rush, but it can go really quickly if I need it to. And so part of that is if you're having someone else set up for you, ahead of time. So before you're in the mix of like the crazy setup, be clear on what you actually need that person to do. So my husband knows the main things I need him to help me with is he puts my tables together, he puts my racks together, he helps me actually get the pipe and drape up, and then he's in charge of lighting. And while he's doing the lighting, I work on getting all the scarves out, getting them on their hangers, doing some ironing, lint rolling, and kind of actually setting up the overall aesthetic of the booth space. So it's really important to be clear on what you're doing. I also, while my husband often comes along with me to the shows and helps me with the setup and breakdown and stops in every once in a while to give me some food, I predominantly do the shows by myself. And so it's really important, even if you're not by yourself, it's nice to early on, get to know the people in the booths around you, build a relationship with them, and be nice to them. Even in the setup time when everything's kind of high stress and everybody's sort of in each other's space, try to stay calm, be helpful, and be supportive, because your few days at the show are going to be so much better if you are friends with the people that are around you, which I've always found it shows that it's really wonderful. Everybody's super supportive and kind of cheering each other on and watching each other's booths so that you can go to the bathroom, and if somebody does have a helper, they'll go out and buy everybody coffee, all of those things. So it's really, you want to get to know the people that are around you. You need to ask for help when you need help, and be helpful when you can also be helpful. Then probably the hardest part of any show, but especially bigger shows, because there's more artists and there always seems to be less information, is the load out. And so this is how it was when I did New York Now. It's the same way with Buyer's Market. It's the same way with ACC. So any of these bigger shows. Loadout is honestly a bit of a free-for-all. There are no loadout passes. You just take your booth down and you get in line with your car and you hope that you're not there forever. So my husband and I always work on coming up with a really specific loadout plan, normally the day before the show ends. Not that our plan always goes perfectly, but it does really help to have a plan. When we did New York Now, which is huge, it really was an absolute free-for-all. So what we ended up doing was breaking the booth down, and my husband was hand carrying everything out, sitting it on the curb. I went and sat with the stuff on the curb. He got the car, pulled up as close as he could on the street, and we just like threw stuff in the car and went for it. Buyer's Market, when I did that, there was a huge snowstorm, and so driving anywhere in Philly was kind of crazy. So I didn't even bother moving the cars in a parking garage across the street from the convention center. My mom and I carried and wheeled everything across the street. So I do always take my own dolly, because you never know exactly how far you're going to have to be moving your things, and you don't want to rely on the fact that the show might have one, because even if they do, they might not really be available for you. So for the American Craft Council show, I again talked to some people that did it before to try and get a little bit more information and understanding about how loadout works. And what we ended up doing, so I know that I can break my booth down, completely broken down, ready to go in the car in 30 minutes by myself. So what we decided to do, because my husband had some free time, he actually went and got the car around 3:30. The show was ending at 5, and got in line to get into the loading dock. So they didn't let cars move in and into the loading dock until 6 o'clock. So the show ended at 5. By 5:30, I was totally broken down, packed, and ready to go. We got into the loading dock and at 6, and we were actually out of there at like 6:15. But again, while that was still kind of stressful because we didn't know they weren't going to let anyone in until 6 o'clock, and so I was just kind of hanging out like everything's packed up and ready to go. It was still super helpful to have a plan as to what we were going to be doing. Because if you don't start, now I do not at all recommend. The only reason that he goes and gets the car before it's totally broken down is because we know that I can break the booth down in 30 minutes by myself. I do not advocate or recommend in any way, shape, or form. If one, you don't know how long it takes you to break down your booth, or two, it takes you a long time to break down your booth, then you need to stay, get your whole booth broken down before you go get your car. We're just always one of the first people packed up, so we know if we just go at it really quickly, I can break it down, he gets the car, we chuck it in, and we're out of there before we're really in anyone's way at all. So, all of that to say, I can't tell you exactly what's going to work for you. Everybody has a different booth display, a different setup. The main thing is that you really do, you want to have a plan, and then you want to be willing to be flexible to your plan. Realize it might drastically change and it might not work, but you're going to be much better off by having some kind of plan in place, as well as, so I had lots of friends who had done the show that I could talk to beforehand. If you don't have that, then while you're at the show, you have several days at the show, talk to people around you, find out people that have done the show before, and ask them specific questions about loadout. Ask them what they normally do, what they advise. You'll find out there are a lot of people that don't even bother going to the loading dock. They'll park on streets around the convention center and hand carry things out just because it still saves them time. But normally everyone's really helpful with that information, but you want to ask that, or you may end up being stuck for hours waiting to get out of the show space, which if you're okay with that and if you're not in a hurry, then that's fine. But I know for my husband and I, normally a show's ending on Sunday night and we both have to go back to work on Monday morning. So we're not really looking to just hang out for a long period of time for the sake of hanging out. So plan and ask questions, and you can find in the craft show planning guide that I've created, I've really taken all of the things that I wish someone had told me and put it together in this I think it's 24 pages, this 24-page guide for you that's giving you, I tell you all of the tools that I use to run my online business to make my life easier and things that kind of run themselves automatically, tell you how I keep track of applying for shows, how I keep track of creating inventory for shows, ideas for booth setup. I give you information as to where I've purchased everything that I use in my booth, so ways that I ended up saving money eventually, but in the beginning I bought a whole lot of things that I wish I never would have bought because I didn't know what I was doing. So the craft show planning guide, I should know this, but the craft show planning guide is 24 pages. It's $15.99. And if you even only find one helpful tip in it, it's going to pay for itself. So I highly encourage you, if you're thinking about doing shows for the first time, or if you've done some shows but don't feel like they've gone as smoothly as you would like them to, or if you've done some smaller shows and are trying to go into some kind of more upper level, bigger shows, I highly encourage you to get it to just make your life easier. I really have created it because it's something that I wish I had when I started doing shows, because I wasted so much time and so much money and made a lot of mistakes because I was just flying by the seat of my pants. And I honestly did my first craft show before I had ever actually even attended a craft show. So obviously I really did not know what I was doing. So I want to help you avoid that. There's plenty of things that can go wrong at a show that there is no way for any of us to control. So what I really like to focus on is how can you plan for and how can you control all of the things that you do actually have control over. So I hope that you have found this helpful, and you're going to want to go ahead and click the link below, grab yourself the craft show planning guide, as well as leave a comment telling me either one new thing that you learned or one question that you still would really like me to answer about the whole craft show process.